Welcome to Day 13 on the Trail. We have 4 readings for today, from Luke 7, verses 1 through 35, Genesis 23, verse 1 through 24:67, 1 Chronicles chapter 1, verse 1 through 2:55, and Sirach chapter 15, verse 1 through 16:23. You may be wondering why we are in 1 Chronicles instead of Psalms today. One of the design elements of the trail is to connect relevant parallels in the Bible. In this case, we find a genealogy recorded in 1 Chronicles that pairs with our readings from Genesis 23 and 24. In Genesis 23, we learn of the death of Sarah. For her burial, Abraham goes to Hebron to purchase a cave at Machpelah. In an extended exchange with Ephron, Abraham insists on paying full price for the cave. However, Ephron wants to give Abraham the cave. But this would also mean that ownership of the cave and property would return to Ephron after Abraham's death. Therefore, by purchasing the cave, at no small price I might add, Abraham has now established a legal foothold in Canaan. And this in turn brings about the fulfillment of one of the promises that God made to Abraham. In Genesis 24, we then find the story of the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah. One thing to note in the story is the amount of repetition that we find here. The events and dialogue between Abraham, his servant, and God is repeated almost verbatim. This repetition is a literary means of highlighting how God is acting in the life of Abraham and the life of his servant. The servant is simply retelling the story and how God is answering his prayer found in verse 12. This can also be true in our lives. Simply retelling our story, telling others what God has been doing in our lives can be an incredibly meaningful and important moment. In Sirach, I would like to explore 2 passages. The first is in the 15th chapter, verses 14 and 15, where it says, "It is He who created humankind in the beginning, and He left them in the power of their own free choice. If you choose, you can keep the commandments, and to act faithfully is a matter of your own choice." So we find the concept of free will highlighted in Sirach. I would like to call you back to the story of the Garden of Eden, where God plants a tree and then commands Adam and Eve not to eat from it. However, He also allows Adam and Eve to choose. They have one simple choice to make. Will they listen to God and not eat of the tree, or will they listen to the serpent and disobey? Now, if God did not want to give humans the freedom to choose, there is a simple answer. Don't plant the tree. However, despite the pain that it will cause, pain that will eventually lead to the death of His only Son, God still gives us a choice. And then in chapter 16, verse 8, it reads, "He did not spare the neighbors of Lot, whom He loathed on account of their arrogance." This is a reminder that goes back to the real sin of Sodom and Gomorrah that we discussed on day 10. The sin that destroyed these 2 cities was not just the overt sexuality that we see in Sodom and Gomorrah, but rather, as we found in Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 49 and 50, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and needy. They were haughty and did abominable things before me. Therefore I removed them when I saw it. Finally, in Luke chapter 7, we have the story of John sending his disciples to ask Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" Now remember, John baptized Jesus. He saw and heard God speak. So what has changed? In the Gospel of Matthew, John's question is even more pronounced as it seems that John is questioning Jesus' mission and identity. Perhaps John has his doubts. I would like to point out an important truth about doubt. Doubt itself is not the enemy. What we do with our doubt is where the problem arises. What does John do with his doubt? He goes and asks about it. He sends his disciples to Jesus to ask him directly. And Jesus responds from the book of Isaiah. Go tell John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised. The poor have the good news brought to them. Jesus is doing exactly what Isaiah and other prophets said would happen when God came to his people. Jesus is bringing hope and life, mercy and grace. And he is continuing that mission today. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.